All right. Well, welcome to our fall legislative preview. As you can see, a pretty casual gathering here on a frosty Monday morning. As I said to some that were on and those that just joined later, the format will be that we will go around the panel, so to speak, with our senators and representatives, give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, who and what they represent, but really focusing on the work they've accomplished in 2022 and the work they're looking forward to in 2023. So that'll take up some good amount of time, but I do think that gives a really good base level of knowledge for all of us on the call. I know sometimes in Southern Vermont we get lost in we're not as close to the mecca of political power up in Montpelier. So I always find it's really good for them to remind us what we're working on, what has been important to each one of their agendas. But the second half we will open up to Q&A. So as you hear things, please write them down. Please have some questions for our senators and representatives. And if they didn't bring up something you're interested in, now is the time. So I want to thank our members for hopping on. As people hop on, I'll continue to let them in. I have with us as well Erica Floriani, who's working at home today. So welcome, Erica. I know her sound has been a little funky, so she's just going to wave there. But I thought we'd kick it off. Brian, as you're taking a sip of coffee, Senator Campion, would you kick us off? Then we'll go over to Senator Sears and we'll go through our representatives after that.
And Matt, do you want us to all really focus on economic development stuff? I missed that piece.
No, I mean, I think it's good.
Priorities.
You have a hand in education. What I have found in my 7 years now is that everything is interconnected. We can have a strong chamber without a good education system. We can't have a good education system without a good housing system. So, I mean, I think there are some key points that we're often talking about. But I think in general,
sure. Okay.
What you're passionate about.
On the economic development front, I think everybody's going to probably be talking about this as well. And we talked about it a little bit in Montpelier yesterday when we caucused. The employee shortage issue is huge. We all face it every day in our other jobs. I see it certainly at the college, not being able to find people for. The college right now, for example, is using paper plates in dining services. It can't find dishwashers, short security people, short van drivers, and then also, other staff folks. So it's a big issue, and certainly, as you say, everything is interconnected. Housing is a huge piece of that, and how can we? It's one thing to make an investment in housing that could take 5, 6, 7 years, but we've got to get housing under control. And I know that there are a lot of public-private partnerships that seem to be popping up, which is great. I even think some businesses are really starting to say, all right, how might I house my employees? So anyhow, those two things for sure. The other big theme for me going back is the mental health crisis that we're dealing with. And I have a particular eye on our schools. I chair Senate Education, and I am increasingly concerned, as we all are and have been for a while, how do we address it? And coming out of COVID, it's particularly acute, not only with kids, but with teachers. How do we help support them? And then related to COVID, the COVID recovery. How do everyone's probably seen test scores across the country. Ours are also not where they should be. We made a big investment 2 years ago in literacy, which this was in part, in result from low literacy test scores. These were kids who weren't reading and writing at grade level by the time they reached third grade. Once that happens, we know it's, as Matt said, everything is interconnected, hard to get caught up. You might start misbehaving, you get suspended, you get expelled. That puts you possibly more likely into the prison system. I mean, education is the root of so much, of course, if not everything in our society, from workforce to just being a citizen. So continuing to work on literacy, post-COVID kinds of recovery. I'll likely have a very new committee. The mental health, of course, as we're saying, right across the board. And I think those are some of the big priorities that I shared with folks yesterday when we caucused. And if anybody has any questions, happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you, Senator Campion. Senator Sears.
Yeah, good morning and nice to be here. And I have to agree with everything Senator Campion said, which troubles me deeply, but that's okay. But I do want to focus on the mental health. We're in it's almost embarrassing how bad our system is. And I think we really need to focus on not on the entire system. I hear from the local hospital, the problems that they're having at the ER, the problems of the lack of forensic capacity. We've seen it in the Pronto case here in Bennington. We're seeing it all over, and it needs to be a number one priority of both the administration and the legislature. If we zero in on one particular facet of it, we miss some of the opportunities. And we see it, a lot of people who are creating problems in our downtown, for example, are suffering from extreme mental health problems. And so we really need to focus on that. And I believe that that's something we started to put in motion last year, but we need to continue to focus on. The housing issues are critical, but I do think with all the money that we put in last year, we need to start to see how the administration is spending that money. There was an interesting conversation yesterday about we're still, auditing money that was spent on Hurricane Irene. So it's going to take a while to make sure that that housing money that we put in last year goes into the right places. Another place that I expect, at least I plan to focus on, is the violence that we're seeing in many communities, and that includes Bennington. We've seen that uptick, particularly firearm violence, and I'm working with town leaders as well as the administration and others on a legislation on that. And one other area I think is critical to when we talk about workforce shortage and so forth. I've become convinced by many of the, quite frankly, economic leaders in this community that the lack of affordable childcare is a huge impediment in getting people to come here to work and keeping people working. And so I think that needs to be a focus. We started the groundwork on that, but the tough decision is going to be how do we pay for it? And that will be coming up in the next session. There's a number of other issues always come up. There's always a sleeper issue, one that you don't expect to dominate, that I'm sure will. But overall, I hope to remain as chair of Judiciary and a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and we'll be keeping our eye on how things go. Last year, when I was very happy to see the money go into the Pathways program for the homeless and for those that lack housing here. We were able to do that in the Senate Appropriations Committee and carry it through the conference committee. And so I'm looking forward to other priorities that are important to the people in this area of the state. So I guess that's covers most of what I had to say, and be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. I'm wondering if our Southern Caucus starts a pool around what is the sleeper issue of the session, and then Brian can take all your money from you. I see you getting ready to talk.
Well, I think it's going to be this issue with church and state, honestly, and I'll let the folks from Manchester in particular weigh in on that. But I think that's going to be the issue that pops up. How do we keep
I agree with
dollars? Yeah.
I should have mentioned that,
public
Brian.
institutions. So, but I'm going to let
I think
Kathleen and
Brian's
Seth
absolutely
work
right.
on that.
It affects North Bennington. It affects Manchester with Burton. And there were comments yesterday in our Democratic caucus, and it certainly shows a split amongst those who would really like to do away with independent schools, quite frankly. And I think it's going to be a contentious issue, and will really affect both the South Shire and the North Shire, obviously, with the North Bennington schools and some of our other independent schools. Last year, I'll add, yeah, Brian, as chair of education, was a leader in passing legislation in the Senate that probably would have solved this problem, but unfortunately, the House chose to not take it up.
The short of it is, the Macon decision from the Supreme Court said that public dollars can go to religious schools, and we're looking for a way to thread a needle that would say, okay, if they do need to go to religious schools, we want to make sure that those schools don't discriminate. And so that's largely the situation. But as Dick just mentioned, there are people that would like to say, okay, we're going to stop funding our Burn Burtons, our village schools. We're going to just shut all those schools down, and then make sure, and that would guarantee that public dollars just go to public schools. But I, for one, feel that would be incredibly disruptive. It's not, we have a really great landscape, I think, in this state of independent and public schools that seems to work quite well. And so I'm going back, and I think others on this call are going back to see again if we can thread the needle to make sure that doesn't happen. So
great. That's a great segue, because Representative James was next on my list. So Kathy, if you want to speak to that and other things that you're working on this session, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, that is a perfect segue. And Senator Sears and Campion have already brought up the issues that I think are going to be most important and that we've been putting a lot of time into, which is housing. I'll let Seth speak to that a little bit more on our behalf. Childcare, I think Dick pretty much nailed it. We've laid the groundwork with a really important bill a couple of years ago, H-171, and now the question is going to be, how can we get a childcare system in place that really serves all families, serves all employers, boosts our economy, and how are we going to pay for it? I'm going to be, I assume, returning to the Education Committee, and the issue of public dollars going to independent schools and mostly to religious schools is going to be huge. I wouldn't even call it a sleeper issue. I just think it's going to be massive. And as everybody has explained, it's going to be very controversial. It's going to split caucuses and split the legislature along non-traditional, or I guess I'd say non-party lines. And we were very disappointed that the House didn't take up S-219 last year. It was a bill that would have gone a long way toward solving this problem. I think in an elegant way that solves the problem in a targeted manner. So, instead of sweeping across the board and, feeling like you need to cut off the flow of all public dollars to all independent schools, it's like, taking a sledgehammer to anyway, whatever that phrase is. So we're going to be supporting Senator Campion, Seth and I certainly strongly in his efforts and in the House's efforts to find a solution that ensures that any religious schools that are receiving public dollars aren't discriminating and are doing the things they need to do. And I really hope that we can settle on that as the answer. So those are three big ones. Like I said, I hope to be returning to the Education Committee. I have been working a little bit on a bill around teacher workforce development, maybe some forgivable loans to attract and retain teachers, and just developing some ideas that I think I'm going to turn into a draft bill so that we can have a good conversation about how we attract and retain educators here in our neck of the woods and across Vermont. So I know we've got a lot of folks that need to go. In the Education Committee, two other issues are going to be universal school meals. We had that program funded through 1 year, and I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about retaining it, and then of course PCBs. So I will leave it at that because we have a lot of legislators on the call I know who need to share their ideas too.
Everybody's being so polite this morning and quick. This is great. We're going to get to some good questions, I think. I do want to get over to Representative Bongartz, but I do want to kind of go slice through the middle as we head up to the North Shire again with Representative Corcoran and Durfee and Whitman. So Tim, if you want to go, and then we'll head over to Dave.
Sure. For those who don't know me, I'm Tim Corcoran, and I serve on the House Transportation and hope to be back there again their next session. Definitely agree what's been said. You know, childcare has always been a top priority for me. You know, we have to, you know, figure out how we're going to pay for that. So that's, you know, definitely on my list. And, you know, I agree with housing. You know, just being in the real estate business, I can, you know, see firsthand the problem that you know, people out there are facing with just the extremely low inventory, and then the cost to actually buy a house is quite daunting for a lot of first time home buyers. So those are, you know, two major issues. But another one you know, that we're seeing now is the cost of fuel. I mean, it's approaching $6 a gallon. You know, it's going to be a major issue. I mean, filling up your tank, you're probably talking to, you know, almost $1,500. So, I mean, I'm not sure, you know, I think we need to partner obviously with our federal delegation to see if there's some type of way to, you know, not only to help the low income, but, you know, the middle class. You know, that's going to be a huge burden. And it's going to put a lot of people in obviously unfortunate situations where they have to decide what they want to do, buy food or heat their house, or you know, or buy prescriptions for themselves. So you know, that's I think it's going to be a big issue. Getting to transportation, you know, I guess I'll preface this by saying, you know, it's been great to get that we receive so much money, and you know, but there's a problem when when you're receiving, you know, billions of dollars as far as transportation. You need to match it. Typically you need an 80-20 match. So the increase that we've been receiving, you know, for this new authorization, the 5-year transportation bill that will kick in next year, we're looking at anywhere between I had it written down here, between 109 and 127 million dollars of match money to expend that. And with declining gas consumption and our revenues being down, and the fact that we haven't had a DMV fee bill in 7 years, which is good, but you know, there comes a time where you got to pay the piper. You know, how as a state do we make that up? And you know, so we're going to be looking quite heavily on obviously electric vehicles. You know, how do we recoup some money from that? And so that's going to be a, you know, priority for their committee, is how do we not leave any federal dollars on the bottom line? Because you know, that wouldn't obviously be good for the state. So I mean, that's I think the transportation is probably number one priority, is, you know, getting the match, electrifying our fleet out there. And I guess I'll leave it at that, is what I feel is priorities for the, you know, the transportation committee, and, you know, as the legislature.
Great. Thank you, Representative Corcoran. I do want to head to Representative Morrissey. I know you're on the call, Mary. So if you just want to speak to your district, and then we'll kind of again move up through the county.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Well, since he doesn't have
Good
snow pants, I'm
morning,
not gonna
chamber members and
just
staff.
today. Can I just put a piece of this from our chapter stuff?
Is there
That's so
another
good.
conversation going on?
Yeah, can people mute for now? Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, sorry. I'm Representative Mary Morrissey, and for full disclosure, I've been a longtime Chamber Board of Director here in Bennington, the Southern Vermont region. And my district in the legislature, I've represented District 2-2 for the past 26 years, which included a large part of Bennington to the eastern line of Woodford. This year, after redistricting, my district is now Bennington District 5, which includes a part of Northern Pownell and most of what District 22 formerly was. I have served in my time in office on numerous legislative committees, from the past two bienniums on the Money Committee of Institutions and Corrections, and prior to that, I served on the committees of Appropriations, Healthcare, Government Operations, Human Services, Transportation, and General Housing and Military. As you can see, I have a wide range of experience from the committees I've served on. My top priority issues to work on this session are working on meaningful legislation to make our communities and our state safer from the high rate of crimes being committed due to gang and drug-related activities. And also some of the mental health issues that have become stronger within our communities that are relating to some of these issues as well. Public safety is a priority for our communities to be able to attract new citizens, to move and work here, and visitors to come to our beautiful region for tourism, recreation, and to just enjoy what our state and region has to offer. Also, economic development is a priority for our region to be able to attract businesses and companies to locate here that will provide good quality paying jobs for our citizens, but also to attract new citizens by means of college graduates and families to move here. Strong retention initiatives for our businesses to stay vibrant and successful in our communities is also another area we should look at, especially after the COVID issues. Along with economic development also comes strong policy for workforce development. They need to be interchangeable. We hear it all the time that our businesses are struggling to find the workforce, and we really need to enhance our workforce, especially after the very much change in how we did business during COVID. Also, top priorities for me, I would like to see a strong review of our tax and regulatory policies as a review, also a review to our programs we fund statewide, what is working and what is not. I think, appropriations does a very good job in looking at that, but I think also the committees of jurisdiction need to carefully look at those areas to see where best practice is actually working on the topics that we're dealing with in the different areas. Also, always top priorities for me are healthcare, mental health, treatment beds and initiatives for addiction and mental health, education, affordable childcare, proven and reasonable good energy policy, veterans issues, and what our real needs are for housing, especially for workforce housing, which ties in with the economic development. I will also continue to advocate, as I have with Dick, for a forensic facility, being that Vermont is only one of 3 states in the country that does not have one. There are other issues, but I think those are probably my top to start with. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Morrissey. We'll go to Representative Durfee.
Thanks. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I think I'm going to be fairly quick just to make sure that there's time, because I really want to hear from the chamber members who are here too. I have no idea where I'm going to be in this coming session. The landscape has changed or will change dramatically in the legislature. We have a very large turnover with a lot of retirements and a handful of incumbents who were defeated. So I have been serving on the Ways and Means Committee for the past couple of years and hoping to be back there, but don't know for sure. I guess I'll just mention quickly a couple things that I've been following. I'll say I agree with everything that's been said so far. When I was out on the campaign trail and having conversations with folks, the issue that I would always say was my top issue in addressing would be childcare, dealing with that. Housing, obviously ties into that very closely, as we've been discussing as far as workforce goes. Just looking at an interesting article, and maybe Representative Bongart will comment in the banner this morning on the front page on a housing issue that I think really sort of distills the problem of workforce housing for the Equinox. That was a zoning violation, and the hotel was fined. So I think that's a really great illustration of one of the ways that we could be addressing housing is by taking a closer look at our zoning regulations. I've been tracking a couple things during the off session. There's a study group. I'm not a part of it, but I've been following it. That's looking at possibly transitioning the education tax from a property tax to more of an income-based tax. We already have a hybrid system. A lot of people do pay on income, and there's been a lot of conversation about the equity, the disparities that causes to lower income people and middle income earners as well. The other issue I've been following, I've been part of a group that's looking at the renewable energy standard that is due to be updated. The House barely failed to override a veto of the clean heat standard this year. And with this new House, that there are considerably more Democrats and progressives in the House than there were this past session. I'm sure the clean heat standard is going to come up again. It goes to Tim's point about fuel costs. We're way over dependent on the fossil fuel industry. I guess back to my conversations on the campaign trail, the issue that I heard more than any was not just how am I going to pay for my heating costs, but how are my neighbors going to pay for their heating costs. So I think that's something that we're going to have to address in the short term. But there's the longer term question about just helping Vermonters move off of this imported, it's a huge drain on our state's finances, to an approach that is more climate friendly. I'll just mention, sorry, I'm Dave Durfee from Shaftesbury and represent a larger part of Sunderland now with the new redistricting than I have in the past.
Great, thank
I'll
you.
pass it over to whoever's next. Yeah.
Yeah, Representative Whitman.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, everybody. We'll see if I can give my spiel without getting granola caught in my vocal cords. So my name is Dane Whitman. I live in North Bennington and represent Bennington District 2-1 along with Tim Corcoran. I was elected first term 2 years ago, so this is my second term, and I hope to return to the Human Services Committee.
Just for clarification, Dan, it's District 2. There's no -1 anymore.
Oh, no more 1. I'm gonna erase that on my notes here. The 1. So I would agree with everybody that childcare is going to be a top priority, especially in the Human Services Committee. 2 years ago, we put out H171, which called for a very thorough study looking at how we could fund a more universal childcare program that's a system that's more affordable for families and supports providers, supports the workforce of providers, employees, and allows us to expand. So I think in the next couple months, we expect that study back. And my hope is that it will give us a menu of options that we can really look at. How are we really going to look at implementing those goals? One thing I'll talk about a little bit more, because on Human Services Committee, my committee assignment with budget recommendations and things like that has been the Department of Health. And I've been appointed to the opioid settlement advisory council, and a lot of my work has been around the opioid epidemic, the epidemic of fatal overdoses that we've been seeing over the last 2 years. 2021 was unfortunately a record-breaking year for people having accidental overdose, and that's largely due to the introduction of fentanyl, a powerful synthetic opioid, into the drug supply. And I'll say that really happy that last year we were able to pass $9 million in ongoing investments into our division of substance use programs, and that included quite a bit of funding for substance use prevention programs. Our prevention partners will benefit from that. Residential treatment programs and recovery housing also received a fund. Looking at workforce supports for people in recovery, started a couple pilot programs, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how those go. We wanted to kind of evaluate that, and something I've felt strongly about for a long time is looking at kind of creating paths for sort of like therapeutic employment opportunities. Also, our recovery centers, Turning Point is what we have here in Bennington, received funding increase that they were definitely due, as well as syringe service providers. And happy to hear that AIDS Project of Southern Vermont is our current syringe service provider, and they're working really closely with United Counseling Services. I'll also say that on the topic of mental health and treatment, I'm really happy that we were able to support our designated agencies like United Counseling Services with a significant increase in their reimbursement rate. Every year we sort of battle to keep up our mental health workers' reimbursement rate with the cost of living, right? So they were, again, due a raise, and we were able to raise that in large part thanks to Senator Sears's work on the Appropriations Committee and everything along those lines. I'll just also say, definitely agree that housing is really sort of another one of these linchpins where everything goes back to housing. Also in agreeing with Dick that we put hundreds of millions of dollars into this system. So it's maybe time to really make sure that it's spent effectively. Along the lines of housing insecurity and homelessness, I do think a big issue this year is going to be looking at the federal funds that we've received as the result of COVID over the past 2 years are running out. And so our sort of the amount of services that we've been able to provide people to house them in emergency housing has been unprecedented over the last 2 years. We've been able to ensure people year-round general assistance emergency housing. And so I think we're going to be looking at tough decisions about how do we create a strong emergency housing system going forward, supporting our local shelter capacity, Coalition for the Homeless. The investment that we saw in pathways is huge. And I think we're hearing from a lot of people that just affordable housing and having available units for people that are ready to transition is super important. And then I'll just say on the point of workforce, like I said, really interested at focusing on programs for people with substance use disorder. And I've also been in some conversations with Bennington's local workforce group on looking at how the state can support more refugee resettlement as an opportunity, and investing in our career technical education like Southwest Tech. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody.
Great, thanks, Dane. And I think our last but not least is Representative Bongartz. I think that'll kind of round us out. So please get your questions ready, and then we'll kind of do a raise of the hand, and I'll put you in a queue so that we got the correct order. But Seth, why don't you finish us out in terms of the panel, in terms of what you're working on?
Okay, thanks. And boy, it's really wonderful to have Dane sitting on the Human Services Committee and paying the attention he pays to it, and how much he helps keep the rest of the delegation informed is really fabulous. And actually, it's really great that we have that from our delegation, we're all sprinkled around different committees so that we can really keep in touch with each other that way. I serve on the Natural Resources Committee, and I'm also on the committee, the Legislative Rules Committee, and Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which reviews agency regulations as they are put forth. So just so people know that I also serve on that committee. I agree with Dave very, very much about the clean heat standard. It's a huge missed opportunity. It's going to set us back. The fact that it didn't pass last year sets us back one more year. And the requirements of the Global Warming Solutions Act are still there. And the longer we wait, the more compressed the time frame and the bigger disruption that comes from having to take the steps that we need to take. And obviously, what we're seeing now with the cost of petroleum products, be it heating oil or gas for our cars, it's like makes it that much more obvious that we need to take the steps that we should have taken last year. I'm working on a piece of some housing legislation right now that I spent the summer working with. I pulled together a group of people both from the Department of Housing and Community Development, from the VHCB, Housing Finance, few people actually from the regional planning commissions around the state, and VNRC. We're looking specifically, as Dave suggested, at what we can do with local zoning regs that often have the effect, and I will say this, I want to be careful using the term because, but have discriminatory impact on the ability of lower income or moderate income people to live in downtowns where there's access to services. And I want to make clear that I think that those discriminatory effects are usually they're not planned to be discriminatory. They are just the fact of what happens with zoning. And especially with zoning that is in many cases 50 years old in different places around the state when the goals were different. So we're looking at how to make it's pretty clear if you think about what we want as a state, that we want to have housing as much as possible in concentrated downtowns. That's what provides access to services. You don't need cars in a lot of instances. And it also chews up less countryside. So that's what we're working on, is looking at the kinds of changes we need to make in zoning regulations to make it easier to have dense housing in downtowns. And that really kind of feeds into another, I'll call this a sleeper issue, but it's a longer term sleeper issue. And that is that Vermont's role as climate haven is going to accelerate dramatically in the coming years. And we need to be ready for that. We need to have thought through systemically as people migrate here. Vermont, by the way, I think we're going to find it's possible Vermont is the most climate resilient state in the country. And as such, we are going to be a climate haven. And there's real opportunity in that if we're smart about it and we funnel the growth that's going to come to the right places. So thinking long term, and long term isn't that long. It's over the course of a few years. I just think that's a bit of an issue that people aren't really focused on yet, exactly, and thinking about it systemically, but we need to be thinking systemically about how we turn that, ironically, global warming into an opportunity as opposed to having it trample us. So housing, childcare, obvious issues, but I want to go back quickly to the one that we talked about at the beginning, and that's the what's going to happen, what the challenge faced by independent schools, and that's an issue for this county in particular, between the North Bennington School and the schools on this end of the county. There's the simple solution. What's happened is that we have a problem that requires, as Senator Campion said, threading the needle, or there's a relatively simple solution available to us, which is just to pass a law that says that we won't send dollars to schools that discriminate against any of the protected classes. Pretty simple solution. There are forces that have never liked independent schools that are using this as an attempt to try to damage that system. We know here the system is kind of a really unique mosaic of independent and public schools that works really well and provides great opportunities for our kids. And this is, especially on my end of the county, this is kind of a life or death issue. And so what we're going to obviously be advocating for is the solution that Senator Campion put in play last year. It'll have to be modified slightly, but S219. And the problem is actually even bigger than people realize, because one of the issues that will be faced here, if the forces that are really trying to do damage to independent schools are able to do so, is where are these kids going to go to high school? Where are these kids going to go to school? Because Burton's an independent school. St. Johnsbury Academy is an independent school, and they're going to stay independent. And the question will be whether the legislature tries to make it impossible for kids to go to them. So if they do that, we better be looking at how we're going to build public high schools as well. So I think, though, that kind of chaos is not something the legislature really, in the end, I'm hoping is going to want. And I'm hoping we can find the simple solution is so obvious, and actually so relatively simple, that I hope we can all, as a delegation and otherwise, as stick together and see that the work of Senator Campion is followed through on this time around. One other quick thing to add is, well, I've already talked about housing. I think I'll just leave it at that. Those are really I've been spending a lot of time on housing this summer, and obviously the issue with independent schools from my end of the county is life or death. And we are going to do everything we can to just help the system, help maintain the current system, find the simple solution, and move forward. So thank you.
Great.
Nice to be
here. Thank you. Thank you to everybody, the senators and the representatives, very, very thorough. And I think Representative Bongard said it well with we've got a great delegation in various aspects of the government. And so hopefully you brought, your questions and we can pinpoint them. I know a couple of our representatives and senators have to leave early. So I know, Kathleen, I think you had to hop off. Dick, I see your hand up. So as you get your questions ready, I'll go to Dick. And if you have ones, especially for Kathleen, I want to make sure that you get those answered. But we'll go to Dick, and then I see Jonah's hand up.
Yeah, very briefly, I just want to make clear that what we have not seen is an uptick in crime. What we've seen is an uptick in violent crime. And people who watched the Albany, New York stations during the campaign obviously believe that crime is riding herd on everything. There is no reason to change our work on criminal justice reform. But what is happening, and I think Erica Matthews said it best, what we've always had firearms in Vermont. What we're seeing is a willingness to use those firearms. And that's what's changed. And that's what we really need to focus on as both a community and so forth. So I really want to make that clear, because it's convenient for politicians to use an uptick in crime to change the focus And I just don't think we should do that. I think we should just focus on the violent crime and what's really happening in our communities. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. Jonah?
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to say a few words. And thank you to all our legislative delegation who are diligently working on these immediate problems of the day. And I guess for my question / request, I'm going to ask us just for a minute to break away from the present and think a little bit about the future, at the same time remembering our past. And you guys probably know what this is leading up to, which is our 250th anniversaries, which are coming up in just a few short years. I want to first comment and thank the delegation for the incredible support we've seen here in Southwestern Vermont for these anniversary activities. Whether it's for Remember Baker this past year that many of you participated with, or the Breckenridge standoff last year, or even the celebrations we did in 2020 at the height of the COVID pandemic. What that's culminating here in Bennington County is a dramatic effort to do this planning work for the 2025 through 2027 time period. And just so people out there know, that's really starting with the anniversary of the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, then the next year, the Federal Declaration of Independence, and then finally in 2027, the founding of Vermont, and of course, the battles of Hubbardton and Bennington. A lot of work has been going on locally. Many of you have been seeing those emails. If you're wondering what you could do, at least in Bennington County, please do reach out to me. But I wanted to say at the same time, we're seeing a lot of ground being made locally. One of the things we're looking forward to doing is coordinating and working with our state 250th Commission, which has been working also since about 2020. There will be a legislative ask this coming session for funding for that 250th Commission effort. And I would like to encourage our legislative delegation to look at that very carefully and hopefully support putting money towards those celebrations as we have done in the past. So sorry for that long-winded observation, but that is my request. And thank you all so much for providing this opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Jonah. Anybody want to comment on that effort so far or future efforts for that?
I'll just comment. I have indicated that I'm hoping that the governor will add into his budget plan for the coming year some funding for the 250 commission for this project. So I'm hoping that he will, but I know appropriations will probably also be dealing with it. But I did, put in a request on behalf of all of us that there would be some funding coming forward, as there was when the 250th Commission launched. There was money put towards it, and it needs to have some funding each year.
Okay, thank you, Representative Morrissey. Tortoise, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I am so grateful and impressed and proud that we have such a strong Bennington County representation in Montpelier, as we do also from Vermont in Washington. And the two things that came to my mind are both related to both crime and media. And on the crime side, the fact that the Community Policing Advisory and Review Board that the Bennington Select Board established, finished its training, has had one public access meeting, and there'll be the second one. They're the third Thursday of the month, and it'll be coming up this coming Thursday. But on that, the advisory part is still a bit in limbo, as it is aware that there is a possibility of legislative action to permit the oversight boards that not only Bennington but other towns in Vermont have established to actually play that role. So that's something that I know many are eager to have encouraged. And now I'll just say the second piece of it, which relates to the media, which is that we are very fortunate to have the Bennington Banner and GNAT TV and other local sources, and that I just learned about the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act that is coming up as a possibility to be funded in Washington. And so my question there is, this is a way that we can encourage our representatives to take matters up to Montpelier. What kind of a role does the legislature play in order to give their support behind, for instance, that Journalism Competition and Preservation Act, since in Vermont especially, the small media and Vermont Digger and 7 Days and a few of those, can use that kind of support. So that sort of comment and question also.
Great, thanks, Tortoise. And we should mention and thank Cat TV. When they saw that we were putting this together, they asked if they could hop on. And so they are recording this. We're recording it as well, but I know they will showcase it as they do daily with a lot of things that are going on, and GNAT as well do a terrific job. Senator Sears, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Tortoise's first issue with the police commission. I've actually a drafting request in for legislation that would allow towns and cities to create their police commission. Either way, it would be up to the select board or the whatever the town government is. As you know, Vermont's a Dillon rule state, and so currently it would take a charter change to allow that. I know that it's a split issue in this community, and I don't know what would happen if this legislation passes, but it's at least would be enabling legislation to allow the towns to make that choice.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Tortoise, and I appreciate you bringing up the media piece. I think we're a firm believer. I'm a firm believer in professional journalism, and I think we've all witnessed when there isn't enough of that journalism, be that through TV or print or anything like that. We have community activists that get showcased on their platforms, thinking that they're providing a service. So I think it's a very we're in dangerous times for sure for local media and even I would say national journalism. So if people want to comment on that as well, and I see Representative James, your hand is up, so I'll let you go.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I just wanted to comment that I spent most of my career in journalism, so this is an issue that's really near and dear to my heart. And I know that our PEG channels around the state are going to be coming to the legislature with some requests this year. I think it's very, very important that we continue to provide funding to the GNATs and the CAT TVs all around Vermont that are doing, I think, such an amazing job of educating voters, making sure that people are getting facts instead of fiction, and providing actual community journalism. I think it is vital to the future of our democracy. I get very passionate about this issue, and I've been starting to do a little bit of preliminary work on the issue of media literacy, and I'm not sure that anything will come of it, but I'm going to be visiting some of our schools over the next couple weeks to see how they teach our kids essentially to assess the quality of sources that they see on the internet, to assess the quality of information, to be able to tell fact from fiction, to know when they're looking at a conspiracy theory, over actual sort of actionable information. And I don't know whether a bill will come out of it or not, but it's something I'm really taking a look at, and have set up a meeting with AOE to learn a little bit more about our Vermont's educational standards and what they have to say about how we teach our kids, basically to assess the quality of information that they're seeing. And I just see our local newspapers and our PEG TV stations playing a huge and very important role. So hope everybody will be on board with full funding. and whatever those stations need to stay alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelly, I see your hand up.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for giving us updates. My head is spinning right now listening to all that you have to do this year. There's so much going on. I guess before Mr. Sears leaves this morning and the conversation that's just happened, I didn't come on with the intention of talking about the law enforcement piece, but the commissions that have been set up, if there is conversation, I hope that we're bringing more of a unified look at things versus just towns. And these officers are coming out of an academy with training. So there should be some kind of connection to the academy piece of this, as far as are we all coming forth with the same plan, so that we can disperse into our communities in the same way. And I not, like I said, I didn't come prepared to have that conversation, but it came on. But it's something that as I've watched all the dialogue that's been happening the last few years, that I felt that I don't hear much about how that's all working together with the training academy at the same time. So that was one thing that go ahead. Do you want to respond?
Oh, sorry, Kel. I was just wondering, I missed part of it. You were in and out. So are you wondering about how we train police officers? And I apologize.
No, I'm not wondering. I have one as a son.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how the commissions are working together with the academy.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
How that as versus just sitting in town. So if you're going to consider more authority to the commissions in the towns, then how are you working together to understand the training at the academy level, and how it's going to work together to disperse into these philosophies into our communities there? Because that's a long training session to come out and then work with a commission on a different mission. So I just want that to
make sure those things are connected.
I just feel that to jump that far, that there's a lot more work needs to be done to have a general. I'm not looking. I don't know that I have all the right words. And then the other piece is Bennington has had the whole southern part of the state has had a lot of momentum going on in the business world. And there's so many challenges that everybody's dealing with the workforce piece of it. But this fuel costs that are going up and how it's going to impact everybody's pockets. So everybody's going to pay more for fuel, and then that means that maybe people will have their discretionary spending will change habits. So I just, I think that when we go and we talk about who needs help, I think that we need to look across the board as to how we can disperse that kind of help for everybody and how it will impact them directly and indirectly. So that was one piece. And then lastly, I from the workforce piece of everything, which is kind of what my the drug epidemic that's going on. That was why I came on this morning, and I was so happy to hear what Dane, all the work that you're doing, because I didn't realize all that was happening. So I'm appreciative of that information. But I think that when we look at all the challenges, mental health, workforce, I think that the drug epidemic piece of things that is going on is a big impact in our community. I think that I know that when I travel the roads in the community that I've lived in my whole life and brought up 2 children, I can see how many people are being impacted, how many families are being challenged, but at the same time, how many children that my kids went to school with that are not in the workforce for so many reasons around the drug epidemic. So I think that is something that we have to keep looking for, that mental health, those training programs, those people, places, and things that they're challenged with all the time when they're in recovery, how we expand on that so that we can have more success in that. That's what I joined in for, but I just wanted to make sure we talked about the law enforcement piece before Representative Sears left.
Do people want to comment on some of Kelly's comments?
So have we worked with the academy at all in any of these commission groups?
Yeah, it's a great question. That there's Dick now. Maybe he can answer that.
But we do work with the academy. A lot of changes have taken place, as you know, with the Criminal Justice Training Council, and it's another area of oversight. It's mainly been under the Government Operations Committee in the Senate, but in the Appropriations Committee, we've been working with Bill Sorrell, who's former Attorney General, who is the chair of the Commission and others, and trying to get things up to speed. I think it's important to recognize that a lot of changes in law enforcement and practices for the better are coming. And there's no denying that we're, as Dane has mentioned and others, an unprecedented opioid epidemic that's, fueling a lot of things. And it's, my dog's going to start barking because somebody's coming to the door, but I'll try to get everything in before he does. And but the main point I would leave you with is that, sorry, we can't compete with the dog. We're making every effort to get this taken care of as soon as possible.
Hey, Senator Sears, Dane, I know you had some comment.
Yeah, thank you. And really appreciate the priority given to this issue by so many people on the call. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about what I briefly mentioned, the Opioid Settlement Advisory Council, which was established by the legislature last year, has had its sort of initial meetings of the summer. And basically what it's looking at is the legal settlements that were a recognition that part of the opioid epidemic that we're dealing with is the fact that pharmaceutical companies were not completely forward with the addictive nature of pharmaceutical painkillers, opioids, and things like that. So many people really are victims of a system that pushed out these pharmaceuticals, and the result of those legal settlements with multiple manufacturers, distributors, has been millions of dollars per year that can now be appropriated towards treatment, prevention, other sorts of tools. So we're meeting every month. It is chaired by Commissioner Levine in the Department of Health. We have members on it from the treatment community, recovery community, people with a direct lived experience. The League of Cities and Towns has a number of folks on this committee. And basically it's a way of bringing everybody to the table and creating recommendations on how to spend these settlement dollars. I am sitting on the committee myself, and I would just encourage you to keep an eye out on our progress as more and more settlements gets, finalized. It's looking at, minimum of $3 million a year, but that's before things like Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family, so we're basically the silver lining of all of this is that we can start to think about how to invest in our communities to begin correcting some of the harm that's been done. And I would just really encourage everybody to stay tuned to that work and provide feedback to me, to Dick on appropriations as we continue to find the best ways to provide resources.
Great. Thank you, Dane. Other questions? It's about 9:10, so we've got a little bit more time if you want it, although I know some of our delegation did have to hop off. But any other questions? I'll always put in a plug for, I think the two issues that we run into most with the chamber, or that I hear the most about, would be around travel and tourism dollars. That is often something that gets brought up, as that tends to be some of the backbone of our economy, especially when it comes to merchants and retailers and restaurants and lodging. But that is usually low funded in terms of its competitors at Maine and New Hampshire and their marketing dollars. So I'm always putting a plug in there. I think the thing that's been, and it's been mentioned a lot today, is around workforce and retention, recruitment, and I often think those being two different things. Being able to bring people in. I know Dane had mentioned kind of the new American and refugees, and having maybe a nice little spotlight there and even bring people in from all over the country. Maybe, like Seth said, some of that climate safe harbor will be bring people in, but it's also about creating a Vermont that they want to stay in as well. And I know that we work hard at the chamber for that. We also work hard at the Shire's Young Professionals for that. And I know we don't have a rep on for that, so I'll rep it for the meantime. But part of the effort around Shire's Young Professionals is not just bringing people to Vermont, but making sure that Vermont is a welcoming state as well, and a dynamic state where they can get all that they need: fiber, cell phone service, healthcare, schooling. So I know that Beth Wallace, who's our chair at Young Professionals, would be echoing those statements as well. So those are the two that I'll want to put in just into the ear of our delegation. Anybody else? I've stalled enough, so if you did have one final question, you'd be able to raise your hand. But not seeing any, we'll get people on to their day. This has been really great. We want to thank all our senators and representatives. We mention this each time. They're very approachable, as you can see. So if you didn't think of a question today or something as you're thinking of it through the day, I know each one of these senators and representatives on the call would gladly take an email, gladly take a call. They're passionate about what they do. I echo Torres, where I think we've got a really great delegation, and we're very proud of the work that they're doing in these very chaotic times. So with that, I want to thank our senators, representatives, and our members for hopping on this early morning. And let's all get back to work. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Good day.